Good morning. Welcome to First Edition, the online ministry of First Community Church. My name is Glenn Miles. I'm the senior minister here in this congregation, and we're thrilled that you've joined us on this day for worship. We want you to know, no matter who you are, where you're from, where you may be going, what you believe, what you don't believe, here you are welcome and accepted as you are. My sermon title today is Overwhelmed? It's a one-word question. Are you overwhelmed, exhausted, tired by events beyond your control, or maybe events that are happening within your own life, heart, and soul? I feel that way sometimes as well. We get a clue from Jesus in Mark chapter 1 about how to deal with this sense of being overwhelmed. His early days in his ministry are an overwhelming list of healings and teachings and preaching and serving and caring, and he finally just takes some time off to go away and be quiet and pray. There's a model there for us to follow. We're going to talk about that in the sermon. Right now there's a QR code coming up for you. We would love for you to capture that code with the camera option on your phone. You can register your attendance, you can submit a prayer concern, and if you choose to do so, you can make a gift to our offering as well. If you're on Facebook or YouTube, take a moment to like our page, will you? We love hearing from you. Let's worship together now.
Come, you who've been wounded, all you who've lost hope. Come, you who are longing for what you do not know. Come, you hungry for justice, aching for heaven on earth. Come, you who've been tossed aside, don't remember what you're worth. Come as you are. Come, you weary, come and lay your burdens down. Come as you are, bring your hopes, bring your doubts and your scars. Come as you are. Come, you who've been cast out, all you who've been shamed. Come, you who are looking for the mystery you can't name. Come, you crying for mercy, hoping for peace on earth. Come, you carrying questions, all you who've been hurt. Come as you are, come you weary, come and lay your burdens down. Come as you are, bring your hopes, bring your doubts and your scars. Come as you are. Oh, you misfits and prophets, and you sinners and saints. Oh, you broken and needy, weird and weary and faint. All who seek to simply open their eyes. All who need to find a safe place to cry. Come as you are, come you weary, come and lay your burdens down. Come as you are, bring your hopes, bring your doubts and your scars. Come as you are, oh you weary, come and lay your burdens down. Come as you are, all your hopes, bring your doubts and your scars. Come as you are. Come as you are.
There's a church in the South that has a Sunday school class for parents of preschool kids. They didn't really like that title. That was literally their title, Parents of Preschool Kids. And so they formed a little subcommittee to come up with a new name. And they came back to the group and said, we're thinking about either learners or searchers or seekers. Well, the total group didn't really like any of those names. There was nothing wrong with them, but it didn't really seem to describe who they were. And so they sent the task force out to go work on another list of names. They came back a week later with one name. They were sure that it was kind of cute and funny. It might make people want to join their group, and it was also truthful. The name of the class was Tired Parents Class. It's really not a bad idea at all, and it fits perfect, doesn't it? In fact, kind of looking around at our world right now and all that we've been dealing with, especially in the last 4 years since the pandemic, we almost could name this morning service Tired People Worship, because we are in many ways worn out. I've been asking for the last 4 years, how are you? How are you doing? How are things going for you? No, really, how are they? And I've heard people say, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm overwhelmed, I'm anxious, I'm worried, and many, many others, all in the same similar kind of vein. And we can understand, can't we? Just looking out at our world right now, it's easy to be overwhelmed and worried by what we see. The pastor of that church with the Tired Parents Class said it's not like we're able to just live life anymore. It seems as though life is just coming at us faster than we can handle. It's too fast. We just can't handle it anymore. And we understand, don't we? I mean, take a moment to consider the slog of a war in Ukraine that just seems to be going on forever. The disaster of the Middle East that seems ready to explode even more so than it already has. The political environment in the United States, where I've said this in a couple of sermons recently, I'm not trying to make things feel worse, but it just feels like, doesn't it, that violence is ready to break out? There's so much anger and frustration in our land. Yeah, it's easy to be overwhelmed, worried, frightened, anxious. But let's be honest. Sometimes it's not just the outside factors. Sometimes it's not just the headlines, the scary news. Sometimes it's ourselves. Sometimes it's our own anxiety, worry, fear, driven nature, whatever it is, that causes us to feel overwhelmed and concerned and worried. Right after I was ordained, I made a commitment that my number one goal, I wasn't public with this, it was only in my head, was to become one of the finest youth workers in the United States. I wanted to become famous. I wanted to be well known. There's a group called Youth Specialties that supported youth ministers around the United States, and they held a big convention every year called the Youth Specialties Youth Ministers Convention. I wanted to be one of those keynoters. Now, there's nothing with having a little bit of desire and ambition, but you'd think that the number one goal for a new youth minister would be to lead young people to a deeper relationship with God. That was on the list, but it was about number 2 or number 3. I really wanted that keynote position. I wanted to be known for how hard-working I was. And frankly, my first couple of years went really well. I inherited a youth group with 5 kids. By the end of the next year, we had 75. By the next year, we were running about 100. That was in kindergarten through 12th grade, but we'd really grown in those 2 years, and it was going really well. Until one day, my wife, Julie, came home and said those 3 words. Have you heard those 3 words that every person fears to hear in a marriage, in a relationship? We need to talk. That's 4 words. I went to seminary. There's no math. We need to talk. She said, I'm tired of being your girlfriend on the side. You're married to the church. You haven't taken a day off in 75 straight days. We haven't had a moment of quiet together. I'm tired of being your girlfriend on the side. If you're going to be married to the church, fine. That's fine. But you won't be married to me. If you want to stay in a relationship, we're going to deal with this. And you're going to become the father that our child needs, and you're going to be the husband that I need. Well, we went to 18 months of therapy. Serious, hard, at times difficult, but amazing therapy with a man named Bill Rowley, who to this day, Julie and I will quote still things he said to us. And this was 30 years ago, as things bubble up or little speed bumps come up in our marriage. Coincidentally, at that same 18-month period, that Youth Specialties Youth Ministers Convention came to San Diego, where I was serving. I was not a keynoter, but we registered to attend. On the first night, we heard the keynote speech by Brennan Manning, one of my heroes in youth ministry, a former Roman Catholic priest, a brilliant writer, an amazing preacher. He challenged us for 45 minutes to get out of our own heads and get out and serve God in a way that the world needed. And some people might have been offended, but I was fired up and excited. The next day, Julie and I attended his workshop on meditation and quiet. And he began by saying, you know you need a quiet time. You know you need to be in prayer. But too many of you are focused on becoming the next great youth minister to make room for God. And right about that time, Julie elbowed me right in the ribs. I have a scar. You can't see it through my robe, but I have a scar right here, still to this day. She was right, and he was right. Sometimes, I suspect, I can't say for sure, but I suspect many of you have had the same sort of feeling. We get so caught up in our own stuff and our own needs and our own desires that we fail to take time to make room for the presence of the Spirit in our lives, to make room for God, to make room for each other. It's a difficult way to live. Always caught up in your own stuff. And maybe you don't blame your desire for your youth ministry, but maybe it's your boss or somebody else that you feel this constant pressure, and the next thing you know, we're overwhelmed. Look at the Gospel of Mark, the first chapter. We heard a long reading, but I'm going to review the whole first chapter to get a sense of what was going on in Jesus' life before we get up to the part where we hear about his work as a healer. It opens with Jesus being baptized. It's a beautiful scene at the Jordan River. John the Baptist baptizes Jesus, and as Jesus is coming up out of the waters, he hears the voice of God. This is my beloved child in whom I'm well pleased. It's a powerful moment, but Jesus doesn't have any time to go to brunch with his family to celebrate this new beginning in his life. He is immediately driven out into the wilderness to be tempted and tested by the Spirit. In fact, the word in Mark in the Greek is throw. It means to be thrown. He was thrown literally by the Spirit into this ministry, into his work, first to face the temptations and the tests that come to all of us. Then he comes back and he preaches a sermon. And then he recruits his 12 disciples. And then he begins his ministry of healing. He heals many. He shows up at Simon's mother's house where she's suffering from a fever. And by the way, fevers in antiquity were dangerous. They could often be fatal. You couldn't run to CVS or Walgreens to pick up some Tylenol to take care of the fever. So it's a beautiful thing that he's done to save this woman's life. And pretty soon, did you hear it was being read? The entire city was there. I'm pretty sure Jesus slept well that night. Then, early the next morning, while it was still dark, he went out to the wilderness to pray. If it had been me, my ego would have said, yeah, you better get up early and you better get down to the church and open the doors and make sure there's room for everybody to come in, because look at all the people that need me and my preaching and my healing and all the rest that I'm doing. Not Jesus. Jesus' ego is checked at the side. He makes his way out early in the morning while it's still dark to recharge, to renew, to re-strengthen himself so that he can fully serve his people. Give himself in a way that matters. A couple of months ago, I had a great conversation with my friend Karen. She's an African-American pastor in a church that is well known for community justice ministry in their community. When there's a need, her church mobilizes and gets out and takes care of that need. Well, in this conversation, I said, we're working on our own community justice ministry needs in our congregation and in our community. Tell me how you organize for it. What is it you do? And she just looked at me and smiled and said, Pastor Glenn, it's in our DNA. When we see a need, we get out and we go and we address that need openly and publicly. I smiled and said, that's a great answer. I love that. But are there any initial steps, anything you do first before you get out to the community? And she said, there is. Before we go and do this work for justice, we bathe our community and the issue in prayer. Before we do anything else, We pray individually. We pray corporately. We name our worries and our fears and the barriers that might be out there. We name our anxieties and the problems that we're going to run into and the criticism we might receive. We name all of that in prayer. And it might be for a few hours. It might be for a few days. It might be a few weeks before we're ready to then take that issue on. I love that response. That language is foreign to us in some ways. We don't talk about being bathed in prayer. Maybe it feels too conservative or something. It's not. It's just a beautiful way that the African American church often describes the work that they're engaged in. To bathe it in prayer, to sit quietly in the presence of God, in the presence of each other, to prepare our hearts, minds, and souls to take on whatever the issue is. Jesus finds his way to a moment of quiet to prepare himself for the ministry that's coming before him. Certainly it must have been overwhelming. All those, from the baptism to the tests in the desert to the initial healings and all the great people coming to him, asking him for his ministry, for his service, for his help. And yet he took time to step back and take a breath and allow himself to be in the presence of the Spirit. Then something interesting happens. All of a sudden, the disciples of Christ show up. Did you hear that in this story? It says that they went and hunted for him. And that's the right word, hunted, because in the Greek, the word literally means to hunt as like an animal, to hunt an animal. They come after Jesus sort of like a church personnel committee on steroids. You know, they're like, Jesus, what are you doing? Don't you see we have hundreds of people gathered outside the church? All these people have come for healing and preaching and teaching, and they need you, and there's all kinds of needs. You need to cancel your prayer time, put that aside, get back out here. It's easy to understand, though, why the disciples react that way, isn't it? I mean, there's real people with real needs. Rick Morley is one of my favorite preachers, and he wonders out loud in a blog post that he writes to preachers like Seth and Mary Kate and me. He wonders in this blog post, how would we react? Would we do exactly what the disciples expect? Put all the other stuff aside and just react to the crowd or react to the need that's pounding on our door at the moment? Or would we have the courage to do what Jesus does? And not let our own ego, our own personal needs, get in the way of the ministry that we've been called to prepare for. It's fascinating, isn't it? How easy it is to be overwhelmed. How easy it is to let everything else that's going on around us control us. I want you to see something from CNN. There's an article about Elmo. You know Elmo from Sesame Street. Elmo posted on X, which was previously known as Twitter, a simple question. He said, Elmo checking in here, how's everybody doing? They got thousands of replies. And basically the response to Elmo was, we're not doing very well. We're in dire straits. I want you to see the three of them. Here's the first one. Every morning, I cannot wait to go back to sleep. Every Monday, I cannot wait for Friday to come. Every single day of every single week for life. Just leave that up there for a moment. Every single day and every single week for life. I don't know what's going on in this person's life. I don't know if this has to do with the world or if it's something personal, something at work or something at home. But I suspect we understand, don't we? Look at the next one. Elmo, I'm depressed and broke. Depressed and broke. Seriously, if you're depressed and broke, you're unable to pay for the therapy or the help that you might need at a professional level. And it becomes almost a vicious circle, doesn't it? One more. I'm at my lowest. And thanks for asking. We get it, don't we? We understand what's going on. But there's sometimes that we just get so caught up in our own stuff that we can't get out of our heads. You know what we preachers do? Well, I'm not talking for Seth and Mary Kate. I'm just talking for myself. Sometimes what we preachers do when we're overwhelmed, we blame you. You have so many needs. You have so many concerns. You have so many worries. You've got to have Mary Kate at your door right now. You've got to have Seth coming by. You need to hear from Glenn. You have so many things. And the governing board and the personnel committee. And yeah, it's not fair. It's not fair. And it's not just preachers. I know you do it too. I know sometimes that you blame your boss or your supervisor or your coworker or your spouse or your mom or your dad or your children, because there's just so much to do. I got to take care of all these things. I'm sorry I don't have any time for you because I've got so many pressures on me in my life, I just can't deal with it. That's why Jesus invites us to go out to the wilderness with him, so that we can more clearly see where we are and where we are needed by those who love us the most. A few years ago, I did a funeral for a man that was not a member of any church. He described himself as spiritual but not religious. He was an acquaintance of mine. We weren't like great friends, but I ran into him at several different events and things around the community. I knew him through a couple of social clubs, that sort of thing. We got into his 80s. He suddenly was diagnosed with a difficult disease and found out he was dying. He said to his children, his adult grown children, I'd like my friend Glenn Miles to lead the service. I was more than happy to do so. He passed a few days later. His children called me up. We set up an appointment. I met with them in their father's home, a big, amazing, beautiful mansion. And we sat down and we went through the normal planning. What scriptures would you like to read? Who will speak? Would you like any music? That sort of thing. And then I took out my other notebook and said, now tell me about your dad. I'd always known him as a kind and gracious person, very successful, but always very, very sweet to me in any interaction that we had. But his oldest son spoke first, and he said, I cannot begin to describe my anger. I played basketball, he said, from 4th grade through my freshman year of college. My father never came to a single game. I played in the high school band as well, the marching band. He didn't come to a concert or a parade or any other event. Not once. Our father worked 7 days a week for 40 years. We were never seen. We were never heard. We were never loved. The youngest of the three, another son, made similar comments. And then he added, I would have gladly lived in a smaller house or driven not as nice cars or whatever it would have taken for us to have our dad in our lives. He was never here, never available. And when he was home, he was on the phone or working on some project for work. And the youngest, the middle child, the daughter, said the anger is real. I don't even know where to begin. And it was quiet. Have you had one of those conversations where there's an awkward moment of silence? I was really tempted to insert some kind of pastoral wisdom, to help them through this. And then I remembered that wound on my side from my wife to be quiet, and I let the awkwardness be. It seemed like 5 or 10 minutes, probably wasn't more than 30 seconds, until the daughter then said, I must admit, it's been a great joy to watch my father become a wonderful grandfather. When my kids were toddlers, he would get down on the floor with them and play some goofy or silly game, or he'd give them horseback rides on his back, or he'd take them outside and play catch with them. I can't believe what a wonderful grandfather he became to all of our children, our children. Her two brothers were nodding their heads up and down. And then she said something that I will never forget. Maybe the gift of being a grandparent is the opportunity to finally become the parent that God always wanted you to be. What do they want? To be seen, heard, and understood. If you look at that article on CNN, on their webpage about Elmo, you'll see that people said, in responding to Elmo, I finally felt safe, seen, heard, and understood. Maybe the simple word on this day is the invitation to take that deep breath, to be quiet, and then to see, where does the world need you? Where are you needed now? It might be the person you're sitting next to. It might be somebody on the other side of the country or the other side of the world. Wherever they are, they need to know that they're seen and heard. And I guarantee you that if you can see another, you too will be seen. In the name of the God who loves us and invites us to share that love with all. Amen.
You